Hey everybody, it's Rusims here and welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to create a video going over some tips and ideas for how to create lore in your game. I spend a lot of time on lore and just general world building in my save files. The reason I wanted to do this is because I think lore is a really important part of keeping this game fun. I feel like with The Sims 4, your own creativity is a huge part of bringing this game to life. I think it's really important to spend time on lore and world building in your save file if you really want to keep this game fresh and fun. Some of these tips may seem similar to some of my gameplay tips videos. I provided some of my tips. You guys have shared amazing tips in the comments as well, so I definitely suggest you guys check those videos out. But this is really a lore focused video. It's not just general gameplay tips. So let's jump into it. My first tip is to have a general idea and a backstory for all of your Sims, but while you do that, also leave elements of the future up to chance. I find backstories very important. I created a backstory for Serena even when I first started the save file, and this was originally a personal save file. I introduced Serena to my channel in current household videos because I was just playing her off camera completely. And to be frank, I didn't spend a lot of time on world building at that time in the save file. I made a Sim that I liked and I ended up just playing her. It's not like I made her parents or anything. I did give her a backstory. So my backstory for Serena was that her parents died and left her a lot of money, and she was in college at the time. She was finishing university and she was slowly hemorrhaging money because she didn't realize the value of it. That was her backstory basically. Obviously, as you guys can tell, she's come a very long way since then. She has a family of her own. She has pretty old kids now. She herself is pretty old, as you guys can see. In that initial stage, all I was really doing gameplay wise was she was going to university. I was having her go on some dates. She had friends and stuff. So that's really all gameplay wise, hanging out with friends, going on dates, and going to university. But when you add that little element of, okay, this is Serena's personality and this is her motivation, it just gives a little bit more depth to the gameplay when you're actually playing it out. Having that element of a backstory can help make these mundane gameplay elements seem not so mundane. So some ideas on how to create a backstory if you don't know how. I suggest maybe using storyline generators online. It's really easy to find them. Just Google storyline generator. They don't always suggest stuff that I personally enjoy. However, I do think it's a good starting point to just jumpstart your creativity. Another tip for creating a backstory is using TV shows or movies that you watch as inspiration. They don't even have to be super drama filled stories. They can even be sitcoms and stuff like that. And my last tip for creating a backstory is to use legacy challenges. I'm not saying to follow legacy challenge completely, every single rule, every single guideline, but a lot of legacy challenges have really interesting generational rules and stuff that you have to play. And even if you don't want to do it exactly, you might be able to draw inspiration from some of those rules. If you are struggling to draw from your own creativity, sometimes legacy challenges are the perfect thing to try out and just look at. Going back to my overarching tip, I did mention even with the backstory, it's really good to leave elements of the future up to chance. If you're using story progression, whether it's EA story progression or MC Command Center story progression, this game can do crazy things that you can fit into your storyline. And I'm talking pregnancies, people getting married, all this stuff. For example, in this household, Corey and Kimmy getting engaged was from story progression. I didn't have that planned, but it worked out for the story. It worked out to drive Serena and her son further apart. Right now, I'm doing some legacy storytelling over on Twitch, and also I've started streaming it on YouTube as well. And in that story, I've utilized things that the game does as inspiration for my own story. Even though I have an overarching story planned out, I have this lore that I want these characters to do these certain things in the future, and I want these relationships. Even with all of that, I still allow the game to do what it does and I incorporate that into my story as long as it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense and I ignore smart, but when it makes sense, it makes sense. And I think being open to that possibility is incredibly helpful in creating your own lore. My next tip is to lean into unhappy or imperfect storylines. So don't be too obsessed with making your Sims happy. I used to play The Sims as just having completely happy families. Everybody had like perfect grades, everybody went to university, everybody had perfect like level 10 jobs, everything worked out for everybody. But let's be real, that's not realistic. That's not always gonna happen in real life. Lore of everybody being happy and perfect, frankly, isn't very interesting. If you want to create actual lore, lean into the unhappiness and the stuff that isn't perfect. So if that means people failing school, people getting into drugs, obviously I use mods for some of it. For example, Corey, when he got into drugs, I use mods for it. Juniper as well. Stuff like that you can use mods for, but you don't need mods. Even just stuff like a disappearance of a sim, a kidnapping of a sim, somebody running away. That's all lore. That's all imperfect stuff that creates more substantial lore than just completely happy and perfect sim. My next tip is to think through your Sims' minds, not your mind. And that means make choices that your Sims would make and not choices that you would make. A big element of this is, of course, having a backstory to play on, because without a backstory or like a personality for your sim, it's gonna be kind of hard to know like what choices your sim would make. But when you have that backstory and personality for your sim and you know what their motivations are, when you're creating lore, you don't want to like make the choices that you as a sim god are thinking rationally about. You want to make the choices that your sim as an imperfect being is thinking about in that moment. So let me give you an example. In this family, the lore is that Serena and her son have had a falling out, and the reason is that her son flunked out of high school. I wouldn't have wanted them to have a falling out. Like if I was not thinking in a lore perspective or thinking as Serena in that moment, I would have had her be super understanding and be like, you know what, Corey, even though you flunked out of high school, I'm your mom, I still love you, all that stuff. However, because I'm thinking as Serena, and Serena is a perfectionist, and she is someone who never thought her son would flunk out of high school, and she was in shock in that moment. She was angry and frustrated and hurt that he would not live up to her expectations, to be frank, and she kicked him out of the house. They were no longer on speaking terms. This ties back to tip 2 about like leaning into the imperfectness. It's real and it's raw and it happens. And if you want lore that's compelling, you need to think as that sim and not as yourself. Tip number 4, experiment with different aspects of the game, not just gameplay. And when I say different aspects, I'm not talking about like different things that can happen in the game. That was one of my gameplay tips in one of my videos. But here what I'm talking about is like do CAS and build mode as well as just gameplay. Or if you're a builder, try to dip your toe into CAS and gameplay. If you are generally in Create a Sim, do the other two. You know what I mean? Like try out the different modes of this game. For me, building lore is kind of a combination of all 3. Yes, it is gameplay. It's playing out stuff that's actually happening to your sim. That's developing lore, that's world building, that's all of it. But for me, a big part of creating the lore of my world is building. Like I spent quite a long time on this house. I made it cozy and cluttered and warm because I felt that's the house that Serena would have. In the LP that I'm setting up for my channel that is coming soon, I have spent such a long time on the builds for that LP. I have like built based on the characters that are going to be living in the builds. I built an apartment that's going to be home to the leader of a gang, and it's very messy and it has paraphernalia all over the place, and it's just like it's not a homey place at all. But it is the way those characters would be living. The like dorm / townhouse that my main character is going to be living in, it's very like cozy and warm, and it's giving to me the way that college students would live. I mean, frankly, it's a little too nice for college students, but all these students have money, so it makes sense to me. The main family home that I've built is a very like homey farmhouse vibe because the characters that are going to be living there are very traditional and have very like family values. They have pictures up on the wall of their kids. So my characters, my backstories are inspiring my build. Cast is a whole nother thing. I spend a lot of time in cast creating the characters for my game because I think it's so important, and I think appearance tells a story. And like, if you just look at my Sims right now, this is not how they've always looked. Let me actually get Kiyoshi up because I think he's a really good example of what I'm talking about and just world building through cast. Obviously, some of this is through CC. I have CC skin details that have allowed me to achieve this, but I have aged him through his appearance. Even though he's just an adult, he looks like an older adult, you know? He doesn't look like the adult life stage in the game because the adult life stage in the game, frankly, is a little bit too young for how old they are now, but the elder life stage is a little bit too old. So what I did, I kept him an adult, but I've aged him through skin details and through a gray hair accessory. And I think I have achieved the effect that I wanted to achieve, which is to make him look like he's aged over the course of his life. And that is time that I have spent in cast that I would not take back because I think it's so important to do things like that when you are creating lore. And let me just add, like, when you spend more time in cast and build mode and when you are investing more time into your Sims appearance and the house, that's gonna help you have your Sims backstory and their personality more enmeshed into gameplay, and that in turn can just like cause more attachment to your Sims. Like, I am so attached to all my Sims in my save files, especially certain Sims that I've played with for so long, like this family, for example. I love them so much. I know that when Serena passes on, I'm probably gonna cry, like real tears, because that's how invested I am into her character. My last tip for this video is to utilize rotational gameplay and don't just play with one household to flesh out a story. If you haven't heard of rotational gameplay before, in essence, it is just playing with different households around your world. When you play with different households around your world, obviously what that's going to do is allow you a chance to flesh out personalities outside of your immediate household. For example, here, my immediate household is this one. It's Serena and her family, but I also sometimes jump into different households such as her ex, Juniper, and her son to flesh out their story. I did an episode on it just recently because I wanted to focus a little bit on Corey and what was going on in his life. So if you are somebody that usually just plays with one household, playing with multiple and utilizing rotational gameplay is really, really helpful for world building and lore because it gives you that opportunity to actually do the world building. Like, that is what rotational gameplay is for. You're not leaving everything up to chance, even though sometimes leaving stuff up to chance can be really fun. It can be funny, but if you have like particular lore in mind, if you have a particular storyline in mind, I really, really recommend utilizing rotational gameplay in order to make it happen. Those are all my tips for this video. I really hope you guys found this video helpful. Please leave any tips for lore that you have down below in the comments. I'd love to read your ideas and opinions on it. I love having lore in my game. I think a really huge reason that I have stayed in love with my game for so long is because I spend so much time on the lore of my saves. So with that, guys, I am gonna go ahead and leave this video here. Like I said, comment any thoughts or ideas down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and also do consider joining the channel as a member for access to some special perks, and I will see you later. Bye, guys.